Today on Crazed Performance Repair, we are going over episode 2 of the Buick piston ring replacement. If you did not see episode 1, be sure to click up in the corner. I will throw a link up there so you can go to that first before you continue on here, because we are continuing where we left off. I have the camshaft out, and I'm going to continue taking the head apart to get the head off the vehicle. So stay tuned and we'll get right to it. Alright, so we are right back where we left off. I have taken this one out, and as I said, I'm going to look up how to do the timing components when I go to put it back together. For now, I'm just going to take this guy and slide it aside like that, and I'm going to pull this camshaft out. And I'm going to go ahead and keep all these little rocker arm things in the same order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up putting this camshaft back in. That way when I bring it to the machine shop, all they have to do is put it in their parts washer as an assembled head, and that'll make life a lot easier for them. It looks like these head bolts can come out, so I'm going to start loosening head bolts quick. I think this corner might be the only one that's going to be trouble. One thing I should also note is there are head bolts down here, so you don't want to take these large bolts out until you make sure there's no smaller bolts holding the head on, because if you take the large bolts out, they have a lot of torque holding down on them. You might end up screwing up those small bolts. You always got to go for the small bolts first, and then reverse cross torque them to remove them. So I'm going to get started with that. Pretty soon we'll have this cylinder head off here, I'd imagine. I might have to lift it up for this exhaust manifold, though. It looks like that might give me a little bit of trouble, so we'll see what happens. Now, whenever you pull these things, you always want to make sure that you check these screens for a bunch of debris. As you can see, this screen here is loaded with a bunch of debris. That's a sign of a future failure. So you want to be sure to clean those out. This one right has a bunch of debris right in that screen. So be sure to clean those out before you reinstall these. And then keep them in the same position, even though I don't think it actually technically matters. But it might. They are different color. I'm not sure if there's something different between the two of them, but I believe there is. So just keep that in mind. Keep them in the same order for good measure. I decided to pull those out to make sure that I don't bust them while I'm doing the head bolts, because these things are insanely tight. So they're very creaky, to say the least. Here, go ahead and just watch this one here as I bust it free. You can definitely hear and feel it. See how it does that? So I'm only going a little bit, and then you can see I'm going cross, torquing, removing them too, to try and keep it as even as possible, to reduce head warpage. Because if you reduce head warpage, the head will need less surface machining to get it true again. Alright, so as it turns out, I definitely have to take these actuators off, because they cause an interference issue with this. I can't lift the cam up because it's hitting the bottom under here, where this thing kind of has a countersunk section. So I definitely have to remove them. So I'm going to go ahead and get this one pulled out, and then we'll go from there, I guess. Okay, so on the exhaust, do it differently than I did it. This exhaust manifold here can be left on the cylinder head. I did not realize that. There's actually a set of nuts that are attached from the top here. I thought I had to do it from the bottom like most cylinder heads, or most exhaust manifolds, I mean. So I was trying to avoid that, and that's why I took it off the head first. I mean, it really didn't kill that much time. But if you just take the 3 bolts off here, you can take the head off with the exhaust manifold and then address the exhaust manifold out of the car. So it'll be a little bit easier at least. And then another recommendation for that is don't take the O2 sensor out of the bung. Just take the connector off and bring the O2 sensor with the manifold, because a lot of times you'll end up stripping out the O2 sensor trying to remove it. Alright, that thing was heavy. That gasket here ended up binding trying to pull it up, and I had a hell of a time getting it out of there. On top of that, there's this little corner here, and there's a bolt that was snagging. I had to force pry it, so I pried between here and a little section of the head, and then I very carefully used the pry bar on the head itself because it's getting machined, but I made sure I put it kind of over here where I knew there wasn't going to be a gasket sealer except for this spot. So if there is still damage, I'll just put a dab of RTV on it, a really, really small dab. Otherwise, I have to clean out all this antifreeze in the cylinders, and then we can go ahead and get to the bottom half and get the pistons out. You need the converter. I'll bring you guys down here to take a look. But you see that weird lumpiness that's going on this thing? The converter has actually begun to melt on this car, and it's probably from all the excess oil that has been burning. So I'm going to suggest that they get a good converter, but now it would probably be a little bit easier to replace it than once I get the car all back together. So let them know that it is an issue, or will be an issue in the future. I'm going to go ahead and just keep going here, and we'll see what they say, I guess. Customer's the one who gets to make the ultimate choice on this. Okay, so as you can see, I just quickly wiped this out. Just a little bit, just enough so that there's not antifreeze everywhere. Now, before I go too far, I will end up having to take and run a tube in here and siphon out the antifreeze that is in the block, because I don't want to have that sitting there when I'm trying to blow out these bolt holes and whatnot, because you definitely have to clean out the bolt holes when doing a job like this. Otherwise, you'll end up with a hydro lock from the bolt and potentially wreck the block. So you definitely don't want fluid inside the bolt hole. So with that, let's go ahead and get to the cylinder head, because we have to prep the cylinder head for the machine shop. It's not ready yet because this vehicle has direct injection. So we don't want to send him with the injectors in the cylinder head, so we have to pull those out. We'll go ahead and do that quick, and then we'll head over to the machine shop and get the cylinder head dropped off. So as you can see, I have the cylinder head in a kind of an upright position here with some rags under it, because there's definitely going to be oil leaking out. I'm going to go ahead and pop these bolts out of here because we don't need to send those to the machine shop. Now, the direct injection, this is going to be the injection rail. So I'm going to go ahead and zip these bolts out, and then we will get these out. Now, I might have to pry quite a bit on this rail, and I'm going to try and do it very carefully to try not to damage anything. They have like a metal ring, usually, or a nylon ring inside here to seal them, and I'll give you guys a better look at what those look like once I get it out. Well, I'm actually pleasantly surprised with how that came apart. It came apart relatively easy. I'm going to give you guys a closer look at how this system works. Okay, so obviously there is the inlet for the fuel rail, the injector port or whatever the injector plugs into, and then the injector itself with the wire connected to it. And then on the injector itself, so this one has the double hard rubber style. So there's two rings here, but those two rings are what seal this thing to the cylinder head. Sometimes they'll send them along with the gasket kit. So I'll take a look and see if they're in there, but there's a special install procedure for those when you have to put those in. So if I run across that, I'll be sure to let you guys know how that goes and what you need to do to get those installed. But if you look at the head here, you can see these are the ports. Now you'll notice their location here is way down by the bottom of the intake port, and the reason for that, the direct injection, for those of you who do not know, direct injection literally injects it directly into the cylinder, and that's how that works. It makes it have a bit of an advantage when it comes to making the engine run a little bit better, but it does make a dirtier engine because the intake ports end up with a bunch of positive crankcase ventilation deposits in them usually. This one has a plastic intake, and it was actually pretty clean, which is surprising considering the amount of blow-by. I'm probably going to also take and remove all these sensors here before I do that, but I just figured I'd show you guys removing the fuel rail before I went ahead and ran this to the machine shop. Okay, so I'm underneath the vehicle now, and part of the game plan here is to get this, the main game plan is to get this oil pan off. That way I can push the pistons up the top. In order to do that, the best plan of action that I've come up with is to take and drop this side of the cradle only. But unfortunately, in order to do that, I'm going to have to take these brackets all the way over here loose, and then I have to take the main bolts loose. And eventually I'll be able to lower it, but this exhaust is also going to be in the way. There's several things that are going to cause potentially a decent amount of headache for me, but hopefully I can get it just enough that I can still weasel the oil pan out of here. It should come out hopefully not too bad, but we'll find out. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Well, that was interesting. I got the pan out, but it kind of fell out when it decided to come out, and I made one heck of a mess. That is where you guys were, is on that stand. You guys can see I have access to the rod bolts now. I'm going to have to turn the crank a little bit, it looks like, but I'll be able to get all four of them at the same time, which will be really nice, and make life pretty easy. We'll go through the rest of this process, but for now I got a little cleaning to do apparently. Okay, so you can see I got this exposed fully now. I'm going to have to go ahead and clean up all the gasket material, the RTV that's left over here, especially like right here. This is where the oil sump goes into. So you don't want to leave any of that there because then it'll end up in the oil pump. And obviously that's a bad deal. I got to do that, but I also have to turn this motor over. Now, the nice thing about having no cylinder head on here, it's very easy to turn over. All I have to do is grab the crank pulley here, and as long as the chain doesn't bind, I should be able to turn it. Yep, very, very easy. So, oh, and I'm getting dripped on. So another thing that you might want to look out for when you do that. Now I'm going to zip out all these rod bolts. I do have replacement bolts. They are a stretch bolt, so I will be replacing them. Now, one thing you want to make sure of is that you do not lose track of which rod cap is for which rod. So what I'll be doing is as soon as I pull it out, I will be marking the rod in the position it is. And I do not mark them with a chisel or a punch because that can actually distort the rod. What I do is I take either one of those carbide gasket super scraper deals or a chisel and I just scratch it. You only want to leave scratches. You don't want to actually hit with a hammer because you can damage things. Another thing you want to do is make sure you keep the same bearings with the same rods and the same crank location, because all that is set up to the perfect area of where it's going to wear correctly. So as long as you torque everything properly, it should not change any of the geometry or dimensions of any of the parts. Now, per the book, it says replace the rod bearings, but unless you see an actual problem, I highly recommend against replacing rod bearings, only because they are already sized, and as long as they're worn good, they're going to sit perfectly, and you're not going to have any issues if you reuse the old rod bearings. Alright, so that's number 4. I marked a 4 on one end, and then I put an arrow pointing towards the front of the motor on the other end, but usually a good rule of thumb is these tangs are always the same, on the same side of the rod. This is our cracked rod design. Also, I've mentioned that in several of my videos before. These cracked rod designs can only be put on one way, so you cannot mix and match them. If you do, it will be instant problems the moment you fire it up, because it will have a rod knock or will be seized up, so you'll know pretty quick. Now you notice the bearings are staying with the crank. I'm just sliding them back in here, and I'll clean them before I do a final install on that. So far the bearings are looking good. Alright, so hopefully you guys can see that, but you can see how good a shape this is in. It's actually in very, very good shape. Well, this motor, I mean, it only had 57,000 miles on it. It's unfortunate that the rings failed. Alright, so my next step here is going to be to push the pistons through the cylinder bore. Now, this does not have any kind of ridge on the cylinder bore, so it shouldn't be very hard at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pry bar and avoiding contacting the crankshaft and making sure that I don't touch the bearing surface, I'm going to put the edge of it like kind of in the corner of where the main cap bolts up, where the bolt actually goes through, and it should not take much pressure at all to just lightly tap the back of the handle here, and it should go right through the cylinder bore, and I'll feel it the instant it does. There it goes. Nice and easy. And that one is through too. So, nice and easy, didn't take much. Alright, all I did was lower the car, lift the hood, and this is how the pistons laid after I pushed them through. So you can see they obviously went clean through. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pull these out one at a time and inspect to see their exact condition, what may have been causing the issue, if anything at all. I'll be looking at tension, I'll be looking at ring gap, and things like that. Let's start with cylinder number 1 here. Oh wow, that is really tight in that bore. Holy cow. That is a really tight, well, I suppose the bore still has a little bit of the scum built up at the top, especially if these rings aren't sealing very well. They're not going to do a very good job of cleaning that. So the skirts aren't even worn out on these pistons. Now I pulled it out this way, so I'm not going to turn it until I see some kind of mark that tells me the front of the engine. Now I'm also not turning the piston ring yet because I'm making sure that there's, looking at the ring gap, I got a ring gap here and a ring gap here. And the reason I'm looking at that is to make sure that they're both lined up with each other, because that would also cause an oil consumption issue. So the oil ring looks like it does not have any tension hardly at all on it. So I would say the oil ring is actually the source of this failure. It might have been repairable with a very good engine flush. It is a theory, and that's all it is at this point. But if you have this situation, perhaps try flushing the engine first, because there is a possibility that that could take care of it. There's the arrow. See it? That's the front. So now we have a locator to make sure that we get these installed correctly when we go to put them back in. I'm going to still clean these up, but I want to go over the rest of them quick. This last cylinder has the skirt coating wearing off pretty bad. I'm gonna look at the rest of them on that side. Oh yeah, this one too. So it's the piston is thrusting, is what that means. I wonder if that doesn't have something to do with the premature failure. And it's only those two though, and this one's fine. So it's only the back two. So I'm going to be doing a little closer inspection of the cylinder walls on those two cylinders and comparing them to the other two cylinders. Make sure there's not something weird going on here that's causing that. I got to go ahead and clean all this up, and then you guys will be right back after I get everything all clean and shiny. Alright, so we have to cut in here. I have actually completed this job, and I have several tips that I am going to give you yet, but you're going to have to wait and watch the rest of the episodes that I will cut into those episodes that I did not know until I finished the job. So be sure to stay tuned for the next episodes. There's going to be 2 more. This is going to be a 4-part series, and we will get this thing done. So stick with me. Like, share, subscribe. Be sure to hit that notification bell, and don't forget to check out my website if you want to purchase some merch to help support me. The more I get, the more I can put into the channel, and the more I put into the channel, the better the quality of the channel will be, and the more videos I will be able to put out. So be sure to do that. Check out my website. I have some shirts available now. The further along I go, the more stuff I'll be able to make available, and the better the videos will get. I invested in a 4K television, so I will be slowly starting the process of getting into 4K videos for any of you 4K guys out there. As soon as I get just a little bit more, I will be investing in a 4K camera, and then comes the computer upgrades to go with editing 4K videos, because honestly 4K takes a lot of power. The 1080p I can do fairly decent. Enough of that. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Stay tuned.